Hi, this is Paul Solt from iPhone Dev TV. We're going to continue the tutorial with the store for our video game that we've been building. And right now we've got to a point where we've stubbed out a user interface that works when we run the app. And so if I go to the pause screen, I can get to it. If I go to the main screen, I can get to it. We can go back to our menu and hit the store button and we can get to it. Now, pressing these buttons doesn't do any visual feedback in our interface, so that's the next thing that we'll want to do. In order to facilitate that, we're going to create an object that's going to keep track of how many of the items in our store the user has purchased. So let's go back to our Xcode project, right-click and say New File. Now, we're going to create an Objective-C class here, so it's going to be Cocoa Touch Objective-C. We'll hit Next, and instead of doing a view controller, we're going to do NSObject. So it'll autocomplete here, and we'll call this our store. Now we hit Next, and then we create it in our project. And with that, we're bumped into our store.m. We actually want to be in our store.h to start. We're going to create two properties here. They're going to be non-atomic, and they're going to be integers, so there'll be a sign. They're not objects, so we don't do strong or weak in this situation. And we're just going to call them int. And then I will call one golden egg count. And then we'll have another property, non-atomic, same thing. Assign int. This will be white egg. All right, so now we're going to switch over to our implementation. Well, actually, one more thing. We're going to conform to the NSKeyedArchiving protocol, and if you type it right, this we can get the reference for. So if you pull this up, you can learn about it. There's two methods we need to implement: init with coder and encode with coder. And we haven't worked too much with initializers, so this is something where we can set up stuff. This is kind of like a constructor if you're familiar with Java or Python or C++ or any of those languages. Our init with coder is going to be called when we load something from disk, and our encode is going to be called when we save something to disk. So now that we say that we're conforming to that, we'll notice that we have two issues, so we need to implement both of these methods. So let's go ahead and do that. We start typing encode with coder right here, and let's put a init with coder above it. So init, and you'll see init with coder, and we're good to go. So the first step we need to do here is we need to initialize self in our init. So this is like any other init method that you've seen. It generally has something like super init. That's what we'll do to get started. And then if self is not nil, then it's safe to use, and we'll do our setup code in there. The last thing we need to do is we need to return self down at the bottom. So with that, we're pretty much set to go with both of these methods. And what I'm going to do is create two constant values. So we're going to be working with the NSKeyedArchiving protocol, and we're going to use a key to represent each of the data attributes we want to save and each of the ones that we need to load. And so I'll create two static NSString values. So we're going to have NSString and then const. So it's going to be star const and then the name. So K and then golden egg. And that's going to equal to some string called golden egg. And then we'll do the same type of thing for the other one. So we're doing this. This is a good programming practice when you're working with iPhone X, especially when you're saving stuff, to make sure that you use the same string. So the benefit of doing this is that we'll use this variable instead of the actual text here on the right in our logic down here to save and load. We're using key values that we're going to be saving data to. And so it's important that the string values match. Otherwise, we won't be able to save and we won't be able to load properly. So the first step we need to do in here is we need to decode a value. And so we have these two variables that we can store values in. They're integers, so we can just store a value in them. And they're actually 32-bit integers. So we're going to use the aDecoder to grab one of those int values. So we can decode a value, and we want to decode an int for key. And so we just say this, and then we give it our key. So the golden egg, we want to use the K golden egg key. And then for the white egg count, we want to use a decoder with the white key. So decode int for key k white egg. Now, this is a tricky situation that you can run into with the advent of 64-bit. So you'll notice that along the top, we have 64-bit here. So when we're saving and loading data, it's important that we save in a format that's going to be consistent. And for now, we're just going to stick to int. That won't have any issues, though you will see issues when you use long. And so you'll want to make sure that you use a type, and you can read more online about how to do 64-bit programming for iPhone. That's a little out of the scope of this discussion. So I'm just warning you that you can run into issues if you're trying to sync data between different devices and one's 64-bit and one's not. All right, enough with that. Let's go on and finish the saving. So encode with coder is going to save our data. And so what we need to do here is we just say a coder encode value. And so we should see an encode int, and it's right here. And you can see there's some specific platform-specific ones there as well for a 32-bit int versus a 64-bit int, which would probably be the optimal thing to do if you wanted precise control as to what's being done here. NS integer, this is the one that's going to have issues with 64-bit. So we're just sticking to int so that it should be okay for us. And in here, we just need to encode our golden egg count, and for key golden egg. So I'll double check to make sure that I haven't made a typo yet in a moment. Then we need our white egg count for key k white egg count. All right, so what I like to do now, and I messed up the ending there. Okay, so we have these two methods here. This is all of the logic that we really need to save and load. We just want to double check that golden egg matches golden egg and white egg matches white egg. And do the same thing down here. Golden egg matches golden egg and white egg matches white egg. If you don't do this check, you can run into issues where, and I accidentally deleted that. Okay, so we're all set here to save and load this data, which means we can start to incorporate this into our view controller. So in our view controller, we're going to create an instance variable that's going to be our store. And this will be right here. We're going to pass a reference this to our store view controller so that it can load up information from it. So we're going to import this store.h, and then we need to initialize it in our view did load. Store is equal to store alloc, gets the memory location, init sets it up. And now when we show the store view controller, we're going to want to pass it in. So I'm going to create a property on the store view controller so that we can get not only a delegate, but the actual store. And we're going to do a week here. So it's going to refer to the store, and this will just be called store. So the point of this is we want to pass data to this class so that it can load it properly. And we're going to be passing our store object, which is going to keep track of how many things a user has purchased. So when we show a view controller, we're going to want to set it to our current store. And I'll just do it every time we show it. So we'll just say store view controller dot store is equal to our store, and that's an underscore store. And then when we press the store button down at the bottom, if I just start typing store, we should see a method for when the store button was pressed. So we just jump to that. And right in here, we can just set our, and it doesn't matter if I set it, it shouldn't matter right now if I set it before or after this line, as long as we set it. So we're passing in the store so that it can use it. So now in our store view controller, we have this store object, and we are going to be able to update our labels when we appear, as well as when the user is buying something. So let's go ahead, and what I'm going to do in here is anytime the buy button is pressed, we are going to be able to increment the value from the store. So we're going to say our store property that we now have a reference to, our golden egg count, and we can just increment this by 1. So we could do the plus plus, or we could do plus equals 1, And then we could do the same thing with our store dot white egg count plus plus. Now I'm going to add another property in here, and this will be a way for us to refresh the GUI. So we'll call it refresh store GUI or store UI. And in here, I'm going to grab the current value from the store and we're going to update the interface. So we're going to do self dot, and then we have the golden egg label dot text is going to be the string value. And we're just going to wrap up the store's count. So we'll do the square bracket and then we will box the value. So we say store dot, and then this is our golden egg label, wrong value. So it should be underscore store dot golden egg count. And then we want the string value. We'll do the same type of thing for the white egg. So pause the video if you need to catch up. What we're doing is we're adding this stuff so that we can refresh the GUI. And then in the by golden and the by white, we're going to add this method call. And we're going to call this anytime we need to call it. So we'll call it anytime the user taps on the buttons to update the UI. We'll also call it when the view initially appears. And so up at the top, we're going to add a new method underneath view did load. It's going to be called void, and then view did appear. And when this happens, we are going to update the values. And actually I want to do, I think, view will appear. So I'll just tab complete and delete what we had here. Now it's important to call the super method, I believe. So if we get the documentation for this, you must call super at some point. It says it right here in the middle, if you can see where my mouse is. So all that means is we need to say super view will appear. Otherwise, we can have some weird artifacts and stuff that can happen in our application. And here we'll just say self refresh store UI so that when the app first loads this screen or when it first appears, it has the correct numbers. So let's go to our store. We'll buy some golden eggs. We'll hit done. Goes away. We come back and it's still there. Now, what happens if we stop the app and run it? All right, so we lost all of those purchases. So as a user, I'd be a little bit upset if I spent real money and they're no longer in the game that I'm playing. So we want to make sure that the store is remembering the values. It does remember them while we're running, but if we stop the app and start it up again, we run into issues. So let's connect the dots. We've got the ability to save and load, but we haven't added the code yet. So let's go back to our view controller class. And I'm going to scroll up to the top. We're going to add a new method. This is going to be to get the documents directory. So we need to work with the file system now. And that means we need to work with where we can save and load. And there's only certain places we can do that. So I'm going to create a method that's going to give me a file path in documents directory. And we'll pass in a file name here. And it needs to be a pointer, so star file name. And I'm doing this wrong language. All right, so file name. And here we can just pass the file name. So now we're going to return a string with the full path. So I'm just going to say return, and I'm doing this all in one line so that we can reuse this functionality in both the save and the load, and not have to type everything and have a little bit cleaner code when we're reading it. So there's a function we're going to call. It's called NS search path for directories and domains. And then this first argument needs to be NS, and then I believe it's the documents directory, not documentation. And then our domain mask should be something like NS user domain mask. I don't know why it has to be so complicated. Then we just say yes. So I've typed this enough times to remember it. Now this is going to be a array, so we need to get the first object. That's what the file path will be. So we're going to say first object and return that value, and our warning should go away. Now we're going to add two methods. We're going to have a save our store, and then we're going to have a load store that we can invoke. And we'll create methods just to make the code more reusable. So we'll call this load store. And then in here, we need to get a file path. So let's create a constant for our file that we're going to call our save file. So this will be NSString star const. So that's a constant string. And then this will be called K store file name. And we'll just call it store.plist just to start. plist should make it so that we can open it up and check out what's inside if it's saved in a certain format. So we'll see if it's openable. Now I want the NSString file path, and I'm going to get that from the method we wrote. So self file path and documents directory, and we pass in our constant for the save or store file name. And that will give us the file path that we can use both in our save store and our load store so that we're loading the same file. Now to save, it's pretty simple. We can get a success value. So actually, I think I want to make this a bool instead of a void return type. And we're going to get a bool value called success. And we're going to assign that to our NSKeyed archiver or unarchiver. And so in this case, we're going to archive. So we'll do NSKeyed archiver and then archive root object. And the root object is going to be our store object, which we implemented the NSCoding protocol. And because of that, we can save it right to our file path, which we have calculated, and we can return our success value. Now, I could have done that on one line, but I think it makes it a little bit more clear what's going on. We can look at the properties here. If I do the option click with the left mouse button, and this shows you what it returns, if it's successful or not, which is why I went with success for this. Our other option is to load it. So here we want to put the value back into store, and we can do that using the NSKeyed unarchiver. So it's slightly different. NSKeyed unarchiver, and it's this bottom one here. All right, so with this, we can unarchive an object with a file path. We pass in our file path, and that will unarchive the object. So if we stop and run, once we actually use this somewhere, okay, so let's figure out a place where we want to save. When do we want to save, and when do we want to load? Well, we know we want to load on start, so let's try that out. What happens if we don't have any save data? What's it going to do? Well, we're not going to have anything. So let's go ahead and rather than make our store down here, so let's get rid of that. I'm going to cut that from view did load. We're going to say if we don't have a store, let's create a new store object. So this logic will set us up if we don't have one. And then in the view did load, I just want to make a call to load store here. So that's where load store is going to go. The next question is, where do we put save store? And what we can do is we can just print out some messages when these actually run. So I'm going to do nslog load store. And then we'll do one for the save store. But I actually want to print out the success, so let's print that out. It's a Boolean value, which means it's going to be 0 or 1, 1 if it's successful, and we can print out the success variable. One of the reasons why I opted, to have a variable here so that we can actually print it out. So underneath where we calculate success, let's put this print statement just so we can see if it's successfully saving. And now let's figure out where we want to save. So anytime the user makes a purchase, we definitely want to save. And when they finish with the store, we'll also save. And I just deleted stuff. All right, so we're back in business. So when we leave the store, let's save. And when we buy something, let's save, just to make sure that we always save. So let's save the store here, because when we're in the store screen, it is going to be referencing the actual store object that we have owned here. And we'll want to save any data associated that has been changed when we make those purchases. So that's one of the reasons why we have this hook here, so that when we're in the store and I'm buying these eggs, you'll see, oh no, it is not saving appropriately, and we have a problem. All right, so let's try and debug what the problem is and see if it really is a problem or not. And one way to check is to open up our simulator. So we're currently running on 7.1, which is this folder, and I'll just open this up. And in here, we have our applications. We should have all the new applications which I've created today. And hopefully this is the latest one, 4.2, I believe is what we're on. Yep, that's what we're on. And in here, we've got a documents directory and there's nothing in it. So something's not saving correctly. Oh, I think I know what I did. Well, we didn't finish writing this file path method. I designed it so that I could append something. So far, it's only got to the documents directory and we're just trying to save there. So it's not a valid directory. So what we'll want to do is we'll want to do a string by appending path component. Here we pass in file name. So I didn't finish writing everything. Pause the video, update this. You just need to add a bracket here, and then we add this to the end. And that should fix our bug. If you wanted to check what the file path is, you could always print this out. So it's a good practice to print out the file path to make sure that it's a sane value. And we'll just print it out when we save just to see what it looks like. So we'll run it again. I go to the store, I buy an egg, it should save. We see success, which is this one, and then we see our file path. So we should see in our Finder window, let's bring Finder back up. We see store plist, I can open it up, and we see some values. We see, it's all kind of gibberishy, but basically when we unarchive this, it will hopefully load up, and we should see values saved between sessions. So let's test it out. Where's the app? Let's buy some golden eggs. And I'm not seeing the UI update at all, which is kind of interesting. I thought we hooked that up, but maybe we didn't actually test it. All right, so let's check out our store. And one quick check, what we can do here. Maybe this doesn't work. Maybe it does, or maybe this is null. So let's try and buy an egg. So I set a breakpoint, and if I buy a golden egg, we should stop here, and I should be able to inspect to see what's going on. So let's see. Let's pull up the variables view, and we see store is nil. So that's kind of a problem. All right, so why is store nil? Let's check out our view controller. And where do we create the store? Oh, right here. So here we're saying, well, if it's store, we'll just delete it and start over. We want to say if not store. So that's a little catch right here. We did the wrong statement, and that is causing our store not to work. So these things happen. And we'll see, okay, store is not nil, so that means it's going to work. It's not going to be a no-op. Before, it wasn't doing anything because it was nil, and that's just how Objective-C works. So now, if I run this, we see 2. So let's get rid of the breakpoint. I'll just drag it, throw it away, stop, rerun. We go to store, and we hit buy golden egg. Hit done. We go back to the store. We buy a couple more. Hit done, play, pause, store. We see everything here. Now let's try and stop the app. So it's already saved. We'll rerun it, and we should see new numbers, but we don't. So let's diagnose why we aren't seeing the store loading, and so let's first start with where we are trying to load the store. So let's see if the store is loading or if it's nil. If it's nil here, that can give us an indication. So let's stop and run. On start, it should load the store. So we have a store object. So let's print out a value from the store. So it's going to be a %D, and it's going to be store.goldeneggcount. All right, so that looks good. It looks like it is saving stuff. So what's the problem with showing our store screen? Well, let's go ahead and make sure we set the store before we show it. Maybe I was incorrect in my previous statement saying that it could happen anywhere, because we are doing this a little bit different than how other stuff does it. So let's go ahead, do that. And I'll look at that. That is working magically. So it turns out, let's try and reverse what we did in the store button pressed. So if I reverse the order, what's happening is it hasn't yet loaded the screen. And because of where I place the code in the store view controller in the view will appear, it's refreshing the store UI, but the store hasn't been set. So it's probably still nil. So let's test that assertion and see if the store is set yet. Go to store, and we see that it is null. All right, so let's make that one code change that I made in the viewcontroller.m file and reverse the order and make sure that we set the store before we show it. We hit store, and we see that it is no longer nil, and we have the correct values. Now we can buy stuff. We're done. We quit the app. We start it up again. We should see those numbers again. And there we go. So now we have a store that we can access within the game. And if we wanted to use these items in our game with the points, we can go in and modify the logic. So that's it for this video. In the next video, we're going to modify the points. We're going to clean up some of the issues, the outstanding issues that we have with the app. And we're going to see if there's anything else that we need to do.